All right, we are live. This is Sound Booth Theater Live. I'm Jeff Hayes, and we are doing the cold reads for The Legend of Zero. Zero's Return, Book 3 of the Legend of Zero series, and this is part 3 of our cold reads for it. So yesterday, I am your resident Sound Booth Theater customer service representative here. Got this shirt courtesy of Mr. Ray Johnson of the Lit RPG audiobook podcast. Thanks again, Ray. But this is the best touch right here, I think. Just a little DB on the shoulder. Anyway, so yesterday we left off in the middle of chapter 3, I believe. I can't remember exactly what the note was that we ended on. But we found out that Joe has become super depressed. Excuse me. We found out that Joe was being super depressed from being so lonely because he's a ridiculous, legendary celebrity, and he feels like everyone around him's either fake or just so in awe of his mere presence that they can't even relate. So he's an icon of the Congressional Army, and he's called upon to do things like giant speeches in front of each new batch of recruits, each new batch of human recruits to the Congressional Army. And he's just finding his life to be very empty now, and the part of the prophecy that he actually was looking forward to. If you guys remember, there is a prophecy going on, starting from the beginning of book 1, about Joe. If you guys remember that, you will remember also that part of that prophecy was that he would find his soulmate, and he never has. His closest friend now is a plasma pistol, I think is what she said it was, a plasma pistol named Jane, who he's just looking for the right moment for Jane to sweep him off his feet into the afterlife, and he's not found the right opportunity for that yet. Hopefully he doesn't, or else this story will be very short. But I don't think it will be. Let's see. Okay, so that's right. This is how... Okay, and we left him kind of debating whether he should talk to this officer lady who has come to talk to him. He's assuming that she's just another person trying to latch on to him, and so he's dismissed her for now, but I don't know, maybe he's going to turn back around and say, wait a minute, I don't know, let's see. I'll be right back. I'm going to grab some water, and we'll get started here. And when Sarah comes back in, I'll watch the green room. She said that she's watering chicks right now. Sarah is always tending to chicks. She is a chick magnet, some might say. But when I return, I'll be watching out for her, and she'll probably have more insight and direction and stuff to provide. So. Okay. Here she is. Sarah is now in the stream. How you doing, Sarah?
Good morning.
I was telling people in the audience that you are a chick magnet.
Yeah, yeah. Ninja chickens, the black kind.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So we're about to get started here. Just kind of got everybody updated on where we are in case they weren't here yesterday. And what is our last line here? Oh, let me... Can you guys hear this? Joe was always alone.
Yes.
All right, good. Joe was always alone. All right, so let us continue on. He really wasn't looking forward to his next chat with... Davin, but he had the nagging feeling it was coming soon. I so hope so. I want more Davin in my life. He hadn't even spoken to the Dreed in a couple rotations, but he saw his old buddy making waves in Congress just about every time he turned on the news feeds. How long is a rotation?
I think it's more than a month. I don't know. I worked out the math one time. It's on a document somewhere. I'd have to look it up, but
Okay. So it's
more than a
I was
month.
thinking it'd be like several turns, but you're saying it's like a fraction of a turn.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
It's the congressional equivalent of a month.
Gotcha. Feeds. The last time he'd talked to his former sentinel, Joe had been busting up yet another white takeover on Telastus, and he hadn't had time to talk. Joe, Planops had quickly learned, had a better sense for white than any Ahi? Okay. Had a better sense for white than an Ahi manufactured Zora scanner, and they'd put him to work combing his way through all the government positions on Telastus, finding plants. Planops had quickly learned, had a better sense for... After all, scanners were wrong 20% of the time. Joe had only ever been wrong once. Well, twice, Joe amended, thinking of Galek. But peacemakers had interfered on that one and had given Galek's chip to his assassin, so that, mentally... Nope. But peacemakers had interfered on that one and had given Galek's chip to his assassin, so that, mentally, the white continued to register to Joe as the Ureki. One more time. But peacemakers had interfered on that one and had given Galek's chip to his assassin, so that, mentally, the white continued to register to Joe as the Ureki. Joe liked to think he would have been able to tell the difference if he hadn't been chipped, and talking to him in his mind as Galek. Joe liked to think he would have been able to tell the difference if he hadn't been chipped as Galek.
Hold on. Let me go look at what you're looking at. I was trying to bring in some Facebook people. What's the line?
Joe liked to think he would have been able to tell the difference if he hadn't been chipped. And talking to him in his mind.
Okay, so there was a white assassin that was chipped as his buddy Galek. And
he was chipped as Galek. I see. Okay. Gotcha. That's right. All right. I don't know why that was confusing the shit out of me. Joe liked to think he would have been able to tell the difference if he hadn't been chipped, and talking to him in his mind as Galek. Excuses, he thought, miserable. So many died for you, and you have nothing but excuses. Excuses, he thought. There we go. Excuses, he thought, miserable. So many died for you, and you have nothing but excuses. God, he wished he'd stayed on Telastus. In a war, with death around every corner, slipping up to him in the darkness, wearing the faces of friends. He hadn't had the time to think. Now, when his only real duties were to show up once a week to dress down a few Planops hopefuls, he had nothing but time. Excuse me. Now, Now, when his only real duties were to show up once a week to dress down a few Plan Ops hopefuls, he had nothing but time. It had quickly become apparent to him that taking the recruiting job on Torat was one of the worst... It had quickly become apparent to him that taking the recruiting job on Torat was one of the worst decisions he'd ever made. Every time he looked those young faces in the eye, he felt Jim Beam calling to him in the back of his head, and raising her seductive voice with his, Jane. I see. He felt Jim Beam calling to him in the back of his head, and raising her seductive voice with his, Jane. Joe dropped the hawk to the roof of his private apartment, ignored the flashes from nearby roofs as the paparazzi got their pics, and unlocked the door to his pad. Once he was inside, he shut the door, leaned his back against it, and tilted his head back to rest against the cheap metal as he stared up at the dusty ceiling. Just a couple more turns, he thought. I can go a couple more turns. I can go a couple more turns. For the 1000th time since leaving the Goiges sprawled over that box on Kolyanot, Joe heard the muffled, tinny words. All right, and this is something we can copy and paste from book 2. This is when Joe almost killed him, right? I don't remember what chapter that is.
Just a minute, I'm still not. Oh, yeah, it's the very last thing before Joe leaves him sprawled out in the box and goes back to the white.
I'm just going to paste the phrase into the search bar for book 2. Hopefully it'll pull it right up. I said hopefully it will pull it right up.
You know, I know Carrie was doing some of this. Maybe she was reading ahead. She and Missy were both reading ahead, and they might have done this already.
All right. But with great responsibility, one finds great loneliness. His hand started to tremble again, and Joe squeezed it into a fist. Not for the first time, he wondered what would have happened if he'd accepted the Goige's plea for friendship. He hadn't understood Forgotten's meaning before, had been too narrow-minded and self-centered to even begin to comprehend. He hadn't understood Forgotten's meaning before, had been too narrow-minded and self-centered to even begin to comprehend. But now he did. He understood it all too well. Every soul-wrenching second, he understood it. He needed a friend. Someone who wasn't stuck debating with fat old sootbags or hunting down intergalactic criminals or making babies while detonating white ships. Someone who could sit across from him over dinner and listen to him pour out his woes, or take him out for target practice when he felt that spirit-smothering urge to use Jane. Joe found himself wondering, again, if he could find Forgotten, and get on his knees and ask him for a second chance. No, Joe thought, the bitterness returning in an acrid wave. He would have used you, and you would have danced to his tune. You're an amoeba to his space station. You can't be friends with something like that. And yet, sometimes, when Joe was staring into that mirror, after waking up alone and hungover yet again, the stale taste of old alcohol or bile burning his throat, he wondered if Forgotten could have helped him. He was still standing there, yet again trying to convince himself not to go seek out the pistol under his pillow, when the call feature started buzzing on his wrist comm. Joe reluctantly glanced down at the device, then winced when he read the origin ID. Old Territory, Kolionot, headquarters of His Excellency Davin Gavora, representative of the Dreet. "Burn me," Joe muttered. He dropped his arm and leaned his head back against the wall to again stare at the ceiling. The last thing he wanted to do was to get lectured on honor and duty by a self-righteous prick on his lunch break. A few moments later, his wristcom activated, without his consent. One of the bennies of being a tribunal member, one that Davin made use of shamelessly, was the tribunal's right to commandeer private technology for the Regency's purposes. All right, so... yeah, Davin is back. My favorite. My feet are getting hot. I'm taking my shoes off. Don't judge me.
Hey, I sent you I sent you what Missy just pasted into YouTube about where to find that Goiji clip. They tracked down the
cool.
the exact. Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. Is it 5 minutes 23 seconds?
I think that's what they said. Into chapter, what was
Wait,
that?
That can't be right, because that's what when he said that line, it was in chapter 36. Maybe we're missing some ones? Or...
I don't know.
chapters... it says chapter 11, but it also says chapter 3.
I don't know. Oh, 5 hours and 23 minutes. So 5 hours, 23 minutes into the book? Wait a minute.
But that
That
can't
can't
be,
be
because
right either.
yeah, because it's at the very end of... it's almost at the very end of the book. Are you guys talking about an earlier quote? Not from the one that I just quoted, but like...
I think it was chapter 36, Tristan. Let me go. I can actually go look it up.
Okay. Technology for the Regency. We shall return to this. Okay.
Yeah, it's chapter 36, guys. It's on Zero Recall, chapter 36.
You guys are trying to trick us, and
he's looking for specifically, but with great responsibility, one finds great loneliness.
all right. It says you're alive and conscious. It says you're alive and conscious. Gotta adjust this one here. All right. It says you're alive and conscious. It says you're alive and conscious. Actually, this is the wrong track. I should be in this track. I'm using the answering machine mode, basically. It says you're alive and conscious. Let's bring that drive down a bit. It says you're alive and conscious. There we go. Davin's irritated voice said. Davin's irritated voice said from the device around Joe's wrist. Did I turn off the... No, I did not. Okay. Need to turn off the nice TV.
It says you're alive and conscious.
There we go. Oops.
And that you're not being tortured or otherwise detained, nor are you in the middle of excellent sex, something my assistant tells me you haven't had in 6 turns, which makes me wonder why you would ignore another call from your best friend in this miserable world. Are you drinking again?
None of your damn business, Joe muttered, still not bringing the unit to his face. What do you want, you unlovable Ferg? The Dreet representative went quiet for so long that Joe brought the wristcom up, thinking Davin had hung up on him. To his surprise, the Dreet was there, but his expression was grave. Upon seeing Joe's face, Davin grimaced.
You look like something a Dasha shat out.
One more time.
You're dead. Oh, you look like something a Dasha shat out.
He muttered, but it was half-hearted at best. Joe narrowed his eyes. Usually, Davin would spend at least an hour lecturing him on the different hells he would enter for his lack of discipline. Never before had he just let it go with a single line.
All right, Joe growled. What the hell's wrong? Another Neskfot? Dasha allied with the Dreet? Forgotten side with the White? What? Dasha allied with the Dreet? Forgotten side with the White? What?
His old friend looked extremely uncomfortable.
Forgotten gained the recognition he wanted for his species, and then disappeared. We've heard nothing more from him since the captured Goiji were granted communications amongst themselves.
Recognizing the Dreet wave beating around the bush, Joe muttered,
Spit it out, Davin. I'm missing an important meeting. J.B. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Joe knew the call was serious when threats of intentional inebriation didn't even get a twitch of response from the Dreet. Instead, Davin gave him a look of... apology? He straightened, obviously steeling himself, then said,
Joe, Earth is about to get convicted of violating the second law of Congress, with intent to violate the first.
Joe froze, the smirk sliding from his face.
Excuse me?
Davin continued to look uncomfortable.
I'm calling to invite you to Kolionot, to stay as my guest. Just hold up a second. As my guest. Just hold up a second.
Joe snapped, shoving himself away from the door.
What the ash are you saying? Earth was burning around with genetics? Was it that flake my brother got mixed up in?
Davin grimaced.
Not just that. They uncovered an entire program. Shapeshifting, telemorphosis, telekinesis, telepathy.
The Dreet's scaly ruby head turned away for a moment before reluctantly returning to face Joe.
Mekval and Alifay have already made up their minds. The humans will lose the trial, and since humans only have one planet, they're all being branded as traitors.
Joe's heart stammered at the word traitors. He swallowed, his chest suddenly afire with adrenaline.
Did you just say they're killing all humans? No,
Davin said reluctantly.
A total recall. One of McVall's nephews died in rooting out the secret installations.
As soon as Joe heard the word nephew, he knew who it had been.
Cavall,
he whispered, his heart stammering for his old friend. Davin nodded his ruby head in commiseration.
You were second in hunting down the Prime Sentinel Ravor guys. You were second in hunting down the Prime Sentinel Ravor guys. Yes.
Soot, Joe managed. Cavall, like his father, Buckall, had been one of the good guys. One of the only Dasha that didn't take slaves or eat sentient creatures. One of the only ones Joe had been able to call a friend. Seeing Joe's reaction, Davin gave him a moment of silence before he went on.
It just took one of the human experiments to kill Cavall and 20 others. All war-hardened Dasha, some with hundreds of turns in service. Dead by one single human. You understand? The Dasha want blood. I'm pushing for penance instead.
Joe's heart was hammering like a miscalibrated engine drive.
Define penance, Dreet.
Davin's scaly ruby face again grimaced.
It is not my place to say. I've already violated a few dozen non-disclosure laws with this call. But I wanted you to know I'm sending my fastest ship. Now hold on a minute.
Joe snapped.
Sending your fastest ship for what?
Davin hesitated. I'll just get rid of that.
Ship for what? To pick you up. For what? To pick you up. To move me to Kolyanot. As my guest. Because they think I was somehow involved with the experiments, and they're recalling me to Earth.
Davin's reluctance was enough to send a cold chill down Joe's spine.
Because they're recalling the entire human ground force and disbanding the human section of the army. Fuck me.
Joe whispered. Bruce Thompson's colorful Earthling vernacular still coming to Joe's tongue, even 4 turns after the Scot had served as Joe's second on Daru.
I've told you 100 times you wouldn't like it if I did, human. I've told you 100 times you wouldn't like it if I did, human.
Davin said, a ghost of his old playfulness back. Then his golden eyes sharpened.
You don't have much time. Ali Faye is calling for a trial. He's giving the human representative 1 rotation to prove Earth's innocence. But there is no defense. The proof is irrefutable.
What are you saying? All Kongis are getting recalled?
All humans.
Davin replied, almost unwillingly.
You only have 1 planet, and it was that planet that broke the laws. Therefore, you will all be sent home. Earth is not my home! Earth is not my home! Last time I was there, the Ash Soul Fergs didn't even want me there. One of them spat in my whiskey right before I rearranged his face. Last time I was there, Get on a ship. Head for Kolinot. My ship will rendezvous with you. If we can get you to Kolinot in time, you'll have diplomatic immunity. Face! Get on a ship.
I want to hear how this plays out. Oops. Okay.
You only have one planet, and it was that planet that broke the laws. Therefore, you will all be sent home. Earth is not my home! Last time I was there, the Ash Soul Fergs didn't even want me there. One of them spat in my whiskey right before I rearranged his face. Get on a ship. Head for Kolinot.
Yeah, that's good.
My ship will rendezvous with you. If we can get you to Kolinot in time, you'll have diplomatic immunity.
But Joe just stared at Davin's picture, unable to believe what he was being told. They're gonna take almost 250 million Kongis and just throw them back on a planet that hates them? And what? Ask them to play nice. Davin gave him a long, uncomfortable stare.
Joe, if Mekval gets what he wants, they're going to bomb all the bases, tech centers, and universities, drop Creonit on the major cities, then leave Earth to serve penance for a sacred turn. It's quite possible the Kongis are going to be the only ones to survive.
Let's hear that one more time.
Joe, if Mekval gets what he wants, they're going to bomb all the bases, tech centers, and universities, drop Creonit on the major cities, then leave Earth to serve penance for a sacred turn.
Ah, sacred.
On the major cities, then leave Earth to serve penance for a sacred turn. On the major cities, then leave Earth to serve penance for a sacred turn. It's quite possible the Kongis are going to be the only ones to survive.
Joe felt his blood burning in his veins. Creonit, the ancestral predators of Dasha, were installed on the worst rebel planets as a way of making sure conquered races couldn't rebound and rebuild immediately, giving their populaces a chance to learn their lesson before being allowed to rejoin Congress. All he could think to say was, "Female Kongis are sterile, Davin." The Dreet's lack of reply was all Joe needed. Swallowing hard, he said, "You think humans might not make it?" Davin looked uncomfortable.
Compared to Creonit, humans are...
The Dreet obviously struggled with a polite way to say insignificant weaklings, a sign that he was actually learning some decorum from his last 20 turns moderating interspecies incidents in the Regency.
Meat. Humans are meat.
Davin glanced away.
The Watcher has a complete genetic profile of every human Kongi to enter the Congressional Army. If your species dies off, it can be resurrected.
Burn that! God damn it, Davin! You've got to do something! We had nothing to do with those soot-wad Fergs back on Earth!
I have done something, you eye-he-loving biped!
Back on Earth!
I have done something, you eye-he-loving biped!
Davin roared back, rearing up his serpentine body. to glare at the screen,
I've spent the last 20 turns arguing with fat, complacent morons who quote rules and legislation made 1,000 generations ago as somehow applicable to our current situation. I'm arguing for leniency instead of total annihilation.
Then he lowered his head in a dreet appeal for accord.
I'm also sending a ship for my best friend. The life of a representative is lonely. Will you join me? But with great responsibility comes great loneliness.
Joe took a deep breath and glanced at the ceiling. He thought of all the humans who were going to die, and all the humans he could save with a well-placed plasma round to the back of a Creonate skull. He took another breath and watched an unidentified desert pest crawl. He took another breath and watched an unidentified desert pest crawl across his ceiling. Softly, he said, "You're saying they're dropping Creonate on the planet? You're sure?" Davin nodded once, wary.
Mekval insisted. Why do you care about...
Then his scaly brows tightened.
Human. Don't tell me you're thinking about...
Thanks for the warning. Thanks for the warning, Davin. You've always been a good and honorable soul. If the sisters are kind, we'll walk the 90 hells together, and I'll see you on the other side. Davin flinched and stared at him for a full minute. His small golden eyes startled. Then, very softly, he said,
Human, when did you learn Vorendreet?
Joe frowned.
So that was actually, you can't really do anything about this, I don't think, but that was actually in a foreign language that he did not know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that. Joe frowned. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. But Davin was staring at him as if he'd suddenly grown mandibles. For a long, awkward moment, the representative said nothing, just stared. Then, in a whisper, the Dreet said,
I see now why she told me to find you. Good luck, my friend. It was an honor serving with you.
Joe felt his frown deepen. Who said to find me? Phoenix? When Davin said nothing, he growled.
Davin, the eye he smite you, I have no idea what you're...
Then he realized that the Dreet had not spoken in Kongi, and that he had responded in kind. Joe felt a chill go up his spine. Davin was staring at him. For several heartbeats, nothing but silence reigned between them. Then,
I revoke my offer of asylum. I revoke my offer of asylum,
the Dreet said softly.
You are not meant to rot on Kolyanot. You have better things to do, human.
And at that, the feed cut off, and Joe was left staring at his wrist like a Ferg. And at that, the feed cut off, and Joe was left staring at his wrist like a Ferg. There we go. And at that, the feed cut... No! Is that all the Davin we get in this book? No! Not fair! All right, next chapter.
There's going to be more Davin, but I think it's a different book. My brainstormers and I were piecing one together where I think he's going to ditch the Regency for a while and just go on like a big D&D adventure with Flea.
All
I think that
right.
was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still want more. Still want more in this book, though. Okay, let's see. How long was that one? That one was also the same size as chapter 1. All right, on to chapter 4, guys. Let me get some more water real quick. Maybe I should blow my nose as well. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Didn't mean to cock tease you there.
So Carrie found, she's been reading ahead and finding new voices that come up in old books, and she posted
Got
in
it.
the chat there.
I see it. Thank you. Chapter 4. Earth on Trial. Earth's trial came a rotation later. The tribunal consisted of 3 elected representatives, including Allie Faye. The first citizen sat all the way on the right, with the Dreet representative's massive ruby coils taking up the center, and a mastodon-sized, iridescent-scaled dasha that had just celebrated its 1000th turn, sitting on the left. Representative Mech Vol's lectern had been removed, and the huge, bobcat-like dasha sat on his haunches on all of his rainbow in. Representative Mech Vol's lectern had been removed, and the huge, bobcat-like dasha sat on his haunches on all of his... In all! Why am I saying all, or on every time? Representative Mech Vol's lectern had been removed, and the huge, bobcat-like dasha sat on his haunches in all of his rainbow-colored glory. The predator's cold green eyes watched Fred unblinkingly as Fred fidgeted on his glass dais in the center of the Regency. Beside Mechval, his white slave, once a fellow representative of Congress, held a datapad for his master with quiet devotion, a vivid reminder of what happened to those who crossed the Dasha Prince. Like the Zela slave, Fred wore no chains, but like the white, he was no less a prisoner of the tribunal than if he were still locked within his room. The Watcher would instantly teleport him right back to the podium if he tried to flee. That, or Mechval would catch him and tear him to pieces. The Dasha looked like nothing would make him happier. Fred ducked his head and kept his gaze fixed on the meager evidence he had managed to drum up from his weeks in solitary. He could feel thousands of alien eyes on him, boring into him from all directions, even below. The transparent dais Fred stood on had a small speaker set into the bottom, and it boomed with Allie Faye's translated voice.
It says you're alive, and that you're not being tortured or otherwise detained, nor are you in the middle of excellent sex. So
Ali Faye's
Representative Mullock, we bring you here today as a spokesperson for your planet, which stands accused of violating the second law of Congress. Humankind has engaged in genetic manipulations of its own species with the intent to use those mutants as weapons. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, Earth was planning an attack on its closest neighbor, the resource-rich planet.
Rahathia? Rahathia.
Sounds good to me.
Rahathia.
There's no vowel between the R and the K.
Earth
I know,
was
it
planning,
Like, this is a throwaway planet. Does not matter.
Gotcha.
and perhaps even more importantly, Earth was planning an attack on its closest neighbor, the resource-rich planet of Rahathia, a member of our great Congress.
All right, let me go listen to Fred one more time.
The walls are 1.5 feet of lead ceramic coming. The committee is here to decide which...
Fred snapped. The attendance of any one representative...
Fine. Has no intentions of attacking any member of Congress. Humans are loyal members.
The hologram... Okay.
What proof do you have against us? What proof do you have against us?
Fred managed. It was purely ceremonial. Fred managed. It was purely ceremonial. He had no defense. Earth was already convicted.
What proof do you have against us?
Fred managed.
What proof do you have against us?
Fred managed. There we go. This time it was the Dasha that spoke, resplendent in his rainbow-colored scales. Representative Mekval looked down at Fred like some disgusting substance that might get stuck to one of his razored ebony talons. No! Of his razored ebony talons. Ebony talons. Damn it. Resplendent in his rainbow-colored scales. Resplendent in his rainbow-colored scales, Representative Mekval looked down at Fred like some disgusting substance that might get stuck to one of his razored ebony talons.
We captured your ships and interrogated your scientists. We found 7 experimental dens, each with more than 300 living test subjects. Slave, packet A1. Slave, packet A1.
He gestured with a scythe-like black claw at the hologram screen, then waited for the former white representative to project the required evidence packet before continuing with a sneer.
The scientists attempted to use these test subjects against congressional forces, and we responded in kind.
Fred swallowed.
Responded in kind? The scientists and test subjects are now dead.
The long pause the Dasha left at the end of his words left no question he thought Fred should suffer the same fate. Still, Fred breathed a sigh of relief. If a few dead scientists was all the damage they were going to do, Earth had gotten off ridiculously easy. The first citizen, however, was not through. Ali Faye's voice boomed in the speaker at his feet, making Fred jump.
Fred Mullock, Earth stands accused of violating the second law of Congress with intent to violate the first. How does Earth plead? How does Earth plead? This was Fred's most important role in the entire trial. If he said guilty, then the trial would end and justice would be dealt. If he said not guilty, then he would be given a chance to try to prove his case. In the last few weeks, however, it had become appallingly clear that Ali Faye had been right. During Fred's imprisonment, Earth had taken over the airwaves in a way unseen since the Peacemaker's capers with Ghost over 20 turns before. The Galactic News Service, one of the few stations that Fred had been allowed to access during his confinement, had been there as the Congressional Army. The Galactic News Service, one of the few stations that Fred had been allowed to access during his confinement, had been there as the Congressional armies uncovered the secret compounds buried deep within their mountain bunkers. Their mountain bunkers. I think I need to do it one more time. Congestion sucks. The Galactic News Service. The Galactic News Service. The Galactic News Service, one of the few stations that Fred had been allowed to access during his confinement, had been there as the Congressional armies uncovered the secret compounds buried deep within their mountain bunkers. They had recorded the dazed states of the experimental humans, noting the fact that the experimentees did not even seem to have a language, but were manipulated like animals with the pain chips that human scientists had installed in their brains. There had even been coverage of a famous Dasha There had even been coverage of a famous Dasha commander getting murdered by one of the human experiments, his entire rainbow-scaled body jerking violently as something inside his brain went horribly wrong, then falling limply to the ground with purple blood leaking from his nostrils. That very same commander, Keval, was a nephew to the Dasha now sitting before him on the tribunal, a well-loved prince who had helped Zero put down the Prime Sentinel Ravor Gaez before Ravor and his white backers could set off an Ekta towards Kolyanat. That very same commander, Keval, was a nephew to the Dasha now sitting before him on the tribunal, a well-loved prince who had helped Zero put down the Prime Sentinel Ravor Gaez before Ravor and his white backers could set off an Ekta towards Kolyanat. A damned congressional hero. And humans had killed him and 23 others on live broadcast. About the only ones not calling for an Ekta were the Dreet, mostly due to the fact Earth had spawned the hero that had led their much-loved representative and other Sentinels to victory, time and again. The Dreet loved a good hero. Yet, Davin Gavora was only one of 3. Looking from the Dasha's stony gaze to the first citizen's unreadable boar-like snout, even then twisted in disgust, Fred knew that the only mercy they might show Earth was if he pled guilty and spared them the drama of a centuries-long trial. Sure, during that time, Earth would be allowed to conduct its business on a probationary basis, but eventually the farce would end and Earth would be punished even more harshly for its crimes. Nothing Fred could do was going to change the tribunal's decision. He could only hope to curry some favor by making the representatives' lives easier. How does Earth plead? McVall snarled. How does Earth plead? McVall snarled. His tone had the challenge of someone who was looking forward to a fight, and the disemboweling that would come afterwards.
Anime Freak asks what I use for recording my voice. Are you asking about the microphone or the program? The microphone is a Telefunken C12. The program is Ableton Live.
Guilty,
Fred whispered. McVall flinched. The Dreet lifted his head startledly, obviously having expected him to plead innocent. All around them, the Regency fell into uproar, so loud it threatened Fred's eardrums. In the chaos that followed, Allie raised one shaggy blue paw.
You realize you will be given no trial?
Fred felt himself sweating again.
Yes, Your Excellency. Earth deserves no trial. We have failed Congress and humiliated ourselves before the Regency. It is not my place to make excuses for Fergs.
Immediately, the Regency burst into alien laughter, as Fred had hoped it would. The first citizen eyed him a moment, his tiny red eyes hard, then turned to confer with the Dasha and the Dreet. The justices argued amongst themselves. At length, their microphones switched off. When they finally pulled away, the Dasha was clacking his obsidian teeth with rage. Ignoring him, Allie said,
Your wise decision has convinced Davin and I to allow Earth to remain within the Congress.
Fred let out a pent-up breath.
However, Earth's crimes cannot be ignored. Congress's rules are not made to be broken. You humans act like spoiled children. You swore to obey our laws, and you broke your oaths. You must be punished.
Fred fought his relieved grin and schooled his face into a picture of concerned attentiveness, knowing that the punishment would be something as simple as trade embargoes, maybe a few extra children drawn away each year for the Congressional Army. No big deal. Because of this, he had to ask Allie to repeat himself when the first citizen recited Earth's punishment.
You are hereby given a sentence of a sacred turn to consider your wrongdoings,
the first citizen intoned again.
Your technology will be destroyed with electromagnetic pulse. Your cities, your universities, your centers of culture and science will all be annihilated. Your ships will be confiscated. Your armies returned without equipment of any kind. You will start over. And perhaps when Congress returns to Earth, after you are done serving your penance in 666 turns, Earth will take its vows seriously.
Fred couldn't believe what he was hearing. For long moments he just stared. When he found the breath to speak again, it was a horrified whisper.
You're going to throw us back into the Dark Ages? Stone Age, more like. Stone Age, more like.
Representative McVall snapped.
And if it weren't for the sentimental worm, you wouldn't even be allowed that.
If you'd like to settle this out of court, the massive ruby-scaled Dreet said calmly, I would be happy to strangle myself another prince.
If you'd like to settle this out of court,
The massive ruby.
I would be happy to strangle myself another prince.
Mekval snarled something in the Dasha tongue, and the Dreet chuckled and settled back into his huge serpentine coil. Ignoring the other two representatives, Ali Faye held Fred in place with cold, red eyes.
Representative Davin has convinced us to give you humans time to think about your crimes. You discovered all of your sciences. You discovered all of your sciences once before, so you can discover them again. Maybe in a sacred turn you will further discover how to honor your oaths. This, as witnessed this day before your peers, is our judgment.
He was being merciful, Fred knew. But Fred still trembled with despair. Everything humans had learned, everything they had accomplished, gone. Almost 820 Earth years in intellectual squalor. All because some ambitious human politician had decided he wanted more land. I mean, that doesn't sound right.
Why doesn't that sound right?
Well, because that's not really... I mean, they just want to be independent, right?
No, they were planning a attack on a nearby planet.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right. Okay, I forgot about that. I thought they were just coming up with a weapon to defend themselves against Congress.
Well, they kind of were doing that too, but it was more than that. It was politicians being politicians.
Really? Politicians are being politicians? That does not sound realistic. That's not how the world works.
Do you have any questions before we mete out justice?
Ali Faye demanded. 1,000 questions ran through Fred's head. Questions of war. Questions of war, of politics, of death, of mercy, of weaponry, of genetics, of technology. But all Fred could say was,
What about me?
Ali Faye laughed.
You will remain here as representative of Earth until Earth sends another delegate.
Let me just get rid of this narration here.
What about me?
Let's give it a little extra time.
I love the quaver in his voice there when he said, "What about me?" That was awesome.
What about me? You will remain here as representative of Earth until Earth sends another delegate.
Fred blinked.
It will take hundreds of turns. Thousands.
Ali Faye's sneer was unmistakable.
Then I suggest you take up an interesting hobby to pass the time.
At that, Ali Faye nodded his tusked blue head at the Watcher, who immediately transported Fred to his room. One more time. Ali Faye nodded his... At that, Ali Faye nodded his tusked blue head at the Watcher, who immediately transported Fred to his room. This time, his door was open, and his outgoing feeds were back online. The trial was over.
Okay, so Rat is coming up next, and she's a really major player in the next few books. So I know we had a lot of trouble with her. You've seen Alien, right? Ripley?
Mm-hmm.
How she's just very very confident and kind of got that psychopathic
Well,
thing
not
going.
Ripley, no.
Is it Alien Resurrection Ripley maybe? Hold on a minute.
I haven't seen that one. I only saw the proper Alien movies, the first two.
The proper Alien. Okay. God, I wish Annie could do I wish Annie could do Rat, honestly, because she just gets the freaking psychopathic
I mean, I can do
girl
that. It's not like...
mojo. Well, right, but okay. When I've told you in the past to do psychopathic girl, she feels flat. Like there's no I don't know. Anyway, I know we've had problems with this one, so I don't know what to do.
I mean, pretty much all I've gotten from our interactions about Rat is I haven't been over the top enough.
She needs to be strong and badass.
Yeah.
She's very confident, strong, badass, just self-assured, but not like egotistical about it. Just like she knows she's a badass. So
yeah, but I mean that hasn't been enough so far. You've been wanting me to send it over the top. Because she's got the whole possession thing going on, right?
Determined. She's got perseverance. When something's like tough, instead of like breaking down, she'll just double down and do it.
I can't remember any scenes where she broke down.
Oh no, well, there's scenes coming. But
where she will break
so,
down?
Okay, so Missy's saying she's got age, battle hardness, and she's ambitious. We're kind of thinking like, as you get into it and see her lines, it'll start to click for you. Because she hasn't really had a lot of personality interaction before this. It's just she's been just angry, and that's all you've seen. So she's just a strong female character that has kind of a psychopathic streak.
Okay. All right. Chapter 5.
She's an assassin.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Yep. Rat's mission. Rat stepped into her prince's chambers to the overwhelming stench of shit and rotting skin. She found Mekval hunched in the center of his chambers in a pile of his own filth, watching the same 10-minute vid he'd had on replay for the last week. The Dasha hadn't allowed his slaves to groom him since the Dreet had helped the humans escape punishment, and he hadn't eaten in longer. What a fuck... Talk about a psycho. I hear you haven't been getting any sleep, my lord, Rat offered gently.
A Dasha doesn't need sleep,
Mekval said, his eyes never leaving the wall screen. Rat, who had been petitioned to approach the Dasha by his desperate, tacky steward, watched Keval's death scene play out twice more in silence before she offered, "This cannot be healthy, my lord."
I trained that boy for 100 turns.
I'm just going to leave that dialogue tag out.
Swore to my brother I'd care for him like my son. He had just started a family. All his sons were killed. His mates and female children stolen by a competitor the moment he was dead.
Rat grimaced. You'd like the Dasha responsible dead? You'd like the Dasha responsible dead, then, my lord?
He broke no law,
Mekval said, rage leaving his words a bare whisper.
broke no law.
Ben Va and I owe you a favor, Rat said. Ben Va and I owe you a favor.
It's already being taken care of,
Mekval said, his voice as frigid as ice. Let's try that again then.
It's already being taken care of, Mekval.
One more time. Not quite frigid enough.
It's already being taken care of, Mekval said.
There we go.
His voice as frigid as ice.
And, hearing it, Rat had no question in her mind that the Dasha in question would die slowly, in great fear and pain. She actually took a step backwards, a little alarmed at Mekval's vehemence. Continuing to watch the screen, Mekval said,
I have a different task for you, Layla.
Rat flinched. He only used Layla when he was about to ask something especially heinous, something that would likely kill her. Still willing to do anything to help break her friend from his self-imposed prison, Rat said, Anything. Anything.
We think a group of experiments survived.
Mekval's voice was cold, ruthless.
I want you to go destroy them.
Rat gave the Dasha prince a reverential bow. Of course, my liege. Kaval had been on Kolionot often after hunting down Prime Sentinel Ravor with Zero, and much of that time had been spent in Mekval's chambers discussing rebel Dasha with Rat and her team. Even being the son of a traitor, Mekval's nephew was probably one of the most decent Dasha that Rat had ever known, as he refused to own slaves or participate in the trade of females. Even Mekval did those things. All her prince needed to do was say the word, and Rat would have gladly died to kill the Vagi responsible.
No one else knows.
Mekval, let's leave that off.
But I hired the Bashnan to analyze the numbers. There is just enough inconsistency in Earth's finances for there to have been one more installation. One that still hasn't been found.
I'll take my team and head to Earth tonight, Rat agreed. Anything to ease her liege from his morbid melancholy.
You will go to Earth. You will go to Earth. You will go to Earth,
Mekval said slowly, turning from the screen to face her for the first time. There was a hesitation to the way Mekval said it, however, that gave her pause. Frowning, Rat said, Is there a problem?
You will go to Earth. You will go to Earth. You will go to Earth.
There it is.
You have to go alone. And you can't come back.
Rat froze. She'd spent the last 20 turns sworn to Mekval, and she trusted him with her life. He had become one of her greatest friends. Though she hadn't trusted him at first, had actually fought the idea of working for him, He had proven to be a wise and benevolent leader, something she never would have guessed from a Dasha. After the first tense 2 turns of dispatching rogue Dasha for him, she had eventually begun to see the depth of his empathy and understanding for the universe. Never once after her initial capture had she questioned. Never once after her initial capture had she questioned. Never once after her initial capture had she questioned. Blech! Never once after her initial capture had she questioned his requests, disobeyed his orders, questioned his directives. It's so funny that she's like thinking of him as like benevolent and shit when he's wanting the extermination of a fucking entire species just because of this.
Yeah, there's more going on with Mechball than if you're reading between the lines, and he's not that great of a guy.
Yeah.
But that comes out later.
No. The word left her lips before she realized what had happened. Once said, however, she did not take it back. Instead of responding with anger, Mechball gave her a long, unhappy look, his green eyes like dying, egg-shaped emeralds set into his rainbow-scaled head.
You can no longer work for me, human. After Earth begins its sacred turn for penance, any human caught off Kolyanot will be killed.
Let them try! Let them try! I follow you to death, my prince.
I would be breaking congressional law if I brought you back afterwards. The same laws I am tasked to uphold.
He twisted to face her, lowering his massive head to touch her chest with his scaly lips in a gesture of Dasha friendship.
And I would be tossed from the tribunal if I sent non-native species back to Earth at the start of its sacred turn. What if your Drit or White found a mate and bred? I can't have that on my conscience. But the abominations and their stewards will die. You understand?
Shaking, Rat looked away. She lived for her prince. She had bloodbound to him in a ritual overseen by her sentinel. She had chosen to serve, and, as the turns had passed, she had been able to imagine no other life for herself.
These experiments that escaped must be killed. If they live, it could change everything.
Frowning, Rat jerked her head back up to look at Mechball. The enormous Dasha was once again watching the video of his nephew's death forever playing out on the wall behind her, examining the way a single, shaking, naked female human had stepped up to the lines of Dasha and closed her eyes. A moment later, Keval and 24 other Dasha commanders simply jerked and collapsed in lifeless piles of flesh and scales. The perfect weapon, Rat thought. With one of those at our backs, the Dasha would never rise again. Then, belatedly, she realized that nothing would ever rise again, because there could be no freedom. Personal choice, individual thought, all of it would be gone. The weapons, once loosed, would take over. The telepaths would kill their way to the top of the congressional hierarchy and stay there. Mechball was right. It would change everything. She swallowed down bile.
You see, how important this is?
Her prince asked softly, watching the scene of his nephew's death continue to replay on the wall. Rat slowly nodded.
My vote was to annihilate the planet. Start over. Start over. Alife was with me, but the soft-hearted Aihi petitioned Davin, and the damned Drit refused to put in his vote.
Rat frowned. The Aihi backed Earth? Why do they even care? She knew from her decades with Ben-Va that the Drit believed, wholeheartedly, that the Aihi, the gentle, harmless, algae-eating Aihi, were living demons of their 90 hells. Aside from the black Drit herself, there was nothing that could calm a room of warring Drit faster than a single Aihi raising its proboscis. Aside from the black Drit herself, there was nothing that could calm a room of warring Drit faster than a single Aihi raising its proboscis for silence. That they had taken humanity's side was odd enough, it made her spine prickle. But McVall wasn't paying attention. Instead, he was gnashing his teeth again at the screen.
Cowardly worms. Takes 3 votes to authorize an ECTA, and Davin instead insists on leniency due to that stupid Drit legend. First time in 10,000 turns the Aihi rise a single voice of dissent in the Regency, and it's over this!
McVall made a frustrated, backhanded swipe at a priceless piece of Ureki-Yeri pottery, shattering it and scattering head-sized pieces across the filthy room in a spray of colorful glass shards. McVall made a frustrated, backhanded swipe at a priceless piece of Ureki-Yeri pottery, shattering it and scattering head-sized pieces across the filthy room in a spray of colorful glass shards. Most of the room was in similar disarray, as McVall hadn't allowed any of his tacky inside to clean it up. Rat watched the pieces of priceless artifact glitter and spin where they had fallen in smears and clumps of Dasha shit for a moment before she said, "Do you know where the installation is?" McVall hesitated and gave her a long look.
The North American continent, between the western coast. Between the western coast.
Where to go?
Between the western coast and the desert. It.
Rat took a shaky breath and let it out between her teeth. I'll need coordinates. Best that you can provide. McVall, who obviously hadn't expected her to agree, hesitated.
It's your last mission. If you go, you will die on Earth.
Then I will die in your service, as was my oath. How do you plan to get me past the telepath? For a long moment, McVall just peered at her. Then, almost suspiciously, he said,
It took my Bosnian team 3 rotations to hack enough files to come to that conclusion. How did you know there's a telepath?
I mean, there's the video right there.
That one was killed. That one and
So?
all the other ones were killed.
All, like, I mean,
So
but he's saying
Congress,
there's another facility.
yeah, okay. Well, everyone else except McFall thinks everybody's dead. And there
Right,
was only one
but
telepath
he
that
just
was
told her.
killed.
He just told her there's another facility. That
Yeah, but
the accounting shows that there's another facility.
yeah, but there was only one telepath that killed a bunch of people. And there were all these facilities and one telepath. And so
But you said that that they killed one, like you said that they killed more than one telepath. Just now you said that.
where? Like in the
No,
book?
no, when you were just talking to me, you said they killed her and the rest of the telepaths.
Okay, however many there were, I didn't, they were rare. They were super rare, and they're not necessarily in every facility. Like
I mean,
I'm
not
not saying,
necessarily, but I'm just saying that, I mean, McVall would. It's a pretty easy assumption to make that there's going to be telepaths if there's another facility that they haven't destroyed.
there was only one telepath for like 100 experiments or 1,000 experiments or something like that. In their experiments, they couldn't replicate telepaths. That was the problem. From the first chapter, they were trying to clone 12A over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, but they don't know that. Like, McVall doesn't know that. If he's wanting to destroy a facility, that means that he's assuming that there's more of the same weapon that they see as a problem. He even says, so you get it. You understand why this is important.
Okay.
Right? So, like, I don't understand why it's a surprise to him that she assumes that there's another telepath.
Because he had to look it up.
Huh. Okay. She smiled at him. How else would an entire installation go unnoticed? It paid off a Goiji? McVall grunted. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, Then, almost reluctantly, he said,
I had a device made. It imitates random human brainwaves. Thousands of them at once.
To blank out my signal. To blank out my signal. To blank out my signal.
We can't black you out completely, but we can make you a mite in a refuse heap. It will be hard for a telepath to single you out, but it could be possible. So, kill them before they have a chance.
And you want them all dead? Not just the telepaths?
All of them. The experiment documentation listed out 3 types: movers, minders, and makers. Telekinetics, telepaths, and telemorphs.
Nope.
Telekinetics, telepaths, and telemorphs. There were even some attempts at making white human hybrids, though we found only one living example of it, and he escaped.
Rat's brow creased in a frown. Escaped. Her prince tightened his ebony claws into the floor, carving holes into the expensive tile.
Zero's team freed him after Neskvat. It was quietly overlooked because that same team consisted of a tribunal member, the Peacemaster, a Boggin Hive Lord, and a living legend. The hybrid is not important, though. He'll die in time, and his sexual organs are non-functioning.
Rat froze, picks of ice suddenly carving away at her veins. Thinking of Forgotten, and how nothing the damn Goiji had done had been happenstance, she said, "Why would Zero and his team free a white human hybrid? Why would Zero and his team free a white human hybrid?" Hybrid.
Because the mothers hate us.
I need to find the Dasha chatter.
Because the mothers hate us.
McVall made an irritated clack of his triangular black teeth.
The experiment was Zero's brother.
Rat felt a sudden wash of tingles up her spine. The genius? I thought he was dead. She had seen the video of his execution. McVall grunted.
Fact. My agents wanted to interrogate him out of the public eye, figure out where he'd gotten the experiment schematics.
What did he say? McVall gave an irritated bat of his paw.
The maggot claims he got drunk, hacked into the computer of one of the installations, downloaded the technology, and experimented on himself because he was bored. They say he was a genius before, but now he's something else.
Half white, Rat breathed. She would have no problem putting a round through something like that. She would have no problem putting a round through something like that, even if it was Zero's brother. Half white. There we go.
If you catch a sniff of him down there, be careful. There's reports he might read minds.
Rat's frown deepened. You're joking.
Would I joke about something like this? Would I joke about something like this?
McVall snapped, slamming a paw into a support pillar. The hollow titanium alloy shredded, cutting the lights to one section of the room and leaving electrical cables sizzling in the open air. The Dasha had begun to pant, neon orange drool slipping from between his razor-sharp teeth to spatter upon the shit-covered floor.
And Zero freed him after he was already dead.
Meaning they could
That
no
might
longer...
have been Rat's voice, actually.
Okay, gotcha. After Zero freed him. After he was already dead. More time. And Zero freed him. After he was already dead. Shit-covered floor. And Zero freed him. Covered floor. Floor.
And Zero freed him. Like the emphasis on freed.
Freed him. Okay, you want... All right. And Zero freed him. After he was already dead. And Zero freed him. After he was already dead. Meaning they could no longer... meaning they could no longer officially look for the hybrid without admitting they had faked another death in front of the masses. Public perception was already at an all-time low, with rumors of mind control chips and Regency corruption, and revealing another fraud like Forgotten's public confession would have only increased tensions. As she considered that, dread built in Rat's gut, spawned by the knowledge that the Goiji's plan must have taken one more unseen step 20 years ago, something they could not have predicted. That the same multi-species ground team Forgotten had hand-picked for Neskfot had released Zero's brother, a genetic hybrid, could not be chance. The idea that they were about to yet again take part in a Goiji's game was so unnerving to Rat that her back prickled. That gut-deep feeling of danger she always got before attempting to do something that would get her killed started to send throbbing tendrils of anxiety through her lungs and spine.
You realize Forgotten is part of this somehow?
Yes! Her prince snarled, hurling another priceless artifact across the room in voiceless rage. And he killed my nephew! He started to pace again.
But he specifically wanted this hybrid, Zero's brother, to live. Why? What's special about him, other than he's a genius?
The prince sneered. The hybrid is a secondary concern, an itch, nothing more. The main concern is finding the telepath. Rat found McVall's dismissal somewhat odd. The telepath could not possibly have been involved. In his nephew's death, and according to congressional law, all of the genetic experiments were equally in need of extermination to prevent the spread of artificial genes. More importantly, Forgotten had obviously taken a personal interest in Zero's brother. That bothered her. The last time the Goiji had taken a personal interest in something, a planet had been obliterated, a tribunal member died, and 134 Dasha princes were executed. Considering the Goiji had somehow worked himself into a mess that even without his intervention could mean even more devastating wars for Congress, Rat knew that the most important thing for them to do right now was to figure out the Goiji's game. To do that, they needed to figure out why he spared a white hybrid.
Why a white? Why a white?
She wondered. All the psychotic burners could do was shapeshift and outthink.
Wait,
Rat said, her neck prickling.
Zero's brother was a genius before the experiment. Like everybody called him the Tesla of the congressional era. What was he after?
I don't care about the hybrid. I want the telepath.
After.
I don't care. I don't care about the hybrid. I want the telepath. The telepath.
Humor me, milord.
Looking annoyed, McVall said, Impotent and insane.
Can he shapeshift?
No. The scientists running the experiments overlooked the fact that a white needs Zora to shift. He has no Zora. They checked.
Shift?
No.
Shift?
No. The scientists running the She frowned.
But he could outthink a white? If Forgotten's plan was to infect the human race with alien genetics during their sacred turn of penance, there would be no need to outthink a white. The only beings allowed on Earth right now are humans. If Forgotten's
Let's drop this one a bit. -4. Whoop, not -44.
If Forgotten's
White?
If Forgotten's plan was to...
But Rat's experience dancing to the Goiji's tune on Neskvat had taught her to think, rethink, and overthink every single piece of the puzzle she found, and she was certain that the white hybrid was part of the puzzle. The more Rat thought about the circumstances of the brothers' escape, the more she was sure that it had been... The more Rat thought about the circumstances of the brothers' escape, the more she was sure that it had been part of Forgotten's plan. Forgotten never did anything by mistake, which made her even more leery of what was to come. "My lord, have you..." She swallowed, trying to decide how to ask such a sensitive question without insulting her master. Mekval gave her a sharp look.
Have I... What?
Already sent White to find them, master. Mekval's scales tightened with anger.
I took an oath to uphold the law.
So you didn't? To hedge your bets? Orange saliva started to dribble from between his teeth, and glacial fury. Orange saliva started to dribble from between his teeth, and glacial fury iced his words when her prince said,
If it were anyone else to have asked me such a thing, Layla, he would be dead right now. No, I did not. Ask me such a shameful thing again, and our friendship will not save you a second time.
Sensing how truly close she had come to meeting her death on her prince's claws, Rat lowered her head in acknowledgement, burning with shame. "My humble regrets, my lord." Mekval grunted.
Mm.
I'll just get rid of that.
Find the telepath for me, and we shall consider the debt forgiven.
The telepath again. Rat frowned, but said nothing. Personally, if she were in Mekval's place, she would be more interested in making sure Zero's brother was neutralized first. Ignorant, scared human weapons she could handle, but if Zero's brother were anything like Zero... So, Zero's brother, she hedged. Do you know where he might be? Do you have an address? A picture? Sure.
The hybrid is a secondary priority. His existence is annoying, but scientists confirmed the experiment had made him impotent, so he's really So he's really of little importance to our goals. It's the ones with the capability to It's the ones with the capability to reproduce that you need to concern yourself with. The telepath and his friends. We don't want the worms breeding.
He swung his head back to again become transfixed by the gruesome images on the screen. Understood, Rat said softly, even though her mind was churning with the exact opposite conclusion. I just need to know what I'm looking for. She knew from experience that the more innocuous Forgotten made something look, the more important it was. Mekval grunted, still watching the screen.
The hybrid is tall for a human. All documents on him were purged by a system error a few months after his escape, but witnesses said his eyes glowed and his hair writhed.
Glowed. Rat frowned. White eyes didn't glow. They just made observers uneasy, like looking into a mirror. A flat, psychotic mirror.
An exaggeration, obviously,
Mekval said, sounding impatient.
An exaggeration, obviously.
Obviously. She glanced again at the grisly death scene that had been replaying on Mekval's wall for 8 days. Knowing the familial ties of Dasha, she understood Mekval's strategic lapse and decided not to push it. Rat took a deep breath, the truth of what she was about to do beginning to sink in. Mekval had given his vow to his brother Bakal to raise Bakal's son as his own. She knew Mekval would board a ship to Earth to kill the experiments himself if she refused him. His honor would allow nothing else. In fact, she was surprised Mekval hadn't killed her for her comment earlier. All a worthy Dasha prince would be able to think of at this point was honor. And she'd bruised it. Badly. Rat gave a nod of acquiescence. I'll find them, my prince. She reached out and switched off the video that had been haunting him for a week. As Mekval grunted and rounded on her, his indestructible scales rattling as they climbed... As Mekval grunted and rounded on her, his indestructible scales rattling as they clamped down in anger, Rat looked up to meet his eyes, gently placed a hand on the cold, glassy slickness of his shoulder, and said, You have my word. I'll kill them all.
Oh my god, Slade is next.
Slade?
Sam, Slade, Ghost. He changes names
okay.
a lot.
What time we at? 1:50. Okay, I think I got one more chapter in me today. And that will do for a whole set, I think. Hopefully this next chapter is not more than 40 minutes. Let's see. We're at 11 right now. Page 70. Ooh. Oh, shit. Oh, God. Oh, fuck. All right, here it is. I might need to start a new set. We'll see.
Just a fire.
Oops. How did that happen? Whoop. Chapter 6. New Basil Harmonious.
That word is alo.
Okay.
And these guys are all criminals.
Okay. This first guy's just a throwaway?
Yes, just a throwaway thug.
Gotcha.
They're leaving us here! The ALO fuckers are leaving us here! They're leaving us here!
The enraged, thuggish scream echoed down the concrete corridors to the chorus of men shouting and beating their Bibles to pieces against the bars. Slade sighed and continued to stare at the ceiling. Of course they were leaving them there. They were criminals. Why should the pious, God-fearing men and women with their self-righteous attitudes and handy lead... Why should the pious, God-fearing men and women with their self-righteous attitudes and handy lead-fortified nightsticks let criminals out of their cells when the earth was about to be rendered back into the Stone Age? That just set a bad precedent. After all, Earth would be lucky to wind up with a couple million survivors by the time Congress returned in its sacred turn. Why should those survivors be the descendants of criminals? When the hooting and chanting continued, Slade sighed and rolled onto his side to face the opposite wall. His bunkmate had been replaced by a graphic brass rendition of the crucifixion, bolted to the concrete with concussion guns. Slade, the wardens had quickly learned, could not have bunkmates. Either he liked them, or he didn't, and either way, it turned out poorly for New Basil Harmonious. The fuck is New Basil Harmonious? Is that the name of the prison?
It's a prison.
Okay.
It's a religious prison.
I see. Harmonious. If he liked them, Slade would turn them into his lackeys and begin yet another carefully designed institution-wide conspiracy to escape, 4 of which had already worked. For other people. Damn it. If he didn't like them, i.e., if they were especially arrogant, obtuse, or otherwise distasteful, he would patiently take the time to give them long, highly logical monologues on their own lacking self-worth and safety until they ended up hugging themselves in a corner, rocking quietly, and shaking like one of those tiny pet dogs in a blizzard. The last one who ended up in the straitjacket had earned that honor for rooting through Slade's stuff while Slade was in yet another mandatory interview with the government shrinks, then stealing and chewing Slade's last illicit stick of gum in front of him, which Slade had been saving to ease his headaches after spending hours explaining to shrinks the mechanisms behind their own personality flaws. The one he'd straitjacketed before that had been a gerbil... The one he'd straitjacketed before that had been a gerbil-brained Ferg who loved to slap Slade's ass while he peed, then giggle when he sprayed the floor and wall. The one before that, Trent, had snored at night. Had that been Trent's only failing, Slade would have simply turned the corpulent dimwit into another lackey, but he'd been a chronic child molester before his repentance at New Basil Harmonious, and Slade hated child molesters. Thus, Slade was alone in his room, staring at his friend, the pinioned dead man statue, listening to the indignant roar of rapists, murderers, and thieves, when he heard the telltale click of someone throwing his cell lock. Frowning, Slade lifted his head to look. A tall...
Okay, the guy coming up, he is a masculine gay guy.
Okay.
Like Fabio. He looks like Fabio.
Okay.
But he's definitely kind of a self-contained, quiet type. Speaks softly, kind of a follower, but also intelligent enough to know that Slade can get them out of there alive.
Gotcha. A tall, blonde, blue-eyed prisoner that Slade recognized from third lunch was standing inside the door to his cell, gripping the bloody, broken handle of a mop with all the reverence of a 12 million... Gripping the bloody, broken handle of a mop with all the reverence of a 12 million credit plasma rifle. Slade was pretty sure he saw hair and scalp clinging to the jagged end. Yes? Slade asked, sitting up carefully. He hadn't remembered pissing this guy off, though maybe he'd hypnotized his little brother into thinking he was a vagina or something.
You the ghost? You the ghost?
The man demanded, peering at Slade. His voice had a distinct southern twang to it, probably Alabama or Louisiana. Ah, hell. I probably hired his sister to escort for me or something. Knowing it was going to hurt, if he survived it at all, Slade put on his best look of horrified innocence and gave the guy's weapon a dramatically terrified look, trying to calculate whether or not he could take it from him. Probably not. He was a computer geek, not a bar fighter, and this guy was definitely 6'4" bash-your-face-in goon material. Me? Slade scoffed, exercising that geekish whine. I wish. Me? Slade scoffed.
So, before you keep going, I probably hired his sister to escort for me or something.
Mhm.
I know you already did it a couple times, but it still felt off on the third one.
What do you want from it?
Hell. I probably hired his sister to escort for me or something. Just like that dry tone. Like,
So not like just flat.
yeah, he's very sarcastic. He's just
Yeah.
like, sarcasm is his second language.
I
First
probably
language.
hired... Ah, hell. I probably hired his sister to escort for me or something.
Yeah, perfect. Great.
I wish. He had managed to keep that particular nugget of information from his wardens and shrinks, but he knew that, as a famous criminal overlord, the criminal underlings, who were usually smarter than their captors by a factor of 12, would start to put A and B together. The blonde dude blinked, then glanced at the gruesome statue on his wall.
I'm looking for Ghost.
Apparently this one should have been given a nightstick, Slade thought, exasperated. Well, he isn't here. But if you're looking to pound some dude's face in, there's a big guy down the hall who likes to read haiku at night. The guy gave him a long look, then, surprisingly, turned and walked back outside his cell in silence. All along the corridor, inmates were howling and throwing their belongings at the blonde through the bars, demanding his attention. Slade frowned when the guy again reached for his lock to seal him back inside. Why are you asking? Slade called, curious. Most of the guys in here would have beat the crap out of him anyway. Just because.
Got a computer to hack?
The blonde said, hitting the lock and sealing Slade back inside.
Got a tip on accessing the warden's account through a secret terminal behind the painting in the janitor's office, but can't get past security. Locked me out on the third try.
Slade sat up so quickly he hit his head on the empty bunk above him. I can help.
That's awesome.
Of him.
I can help. He shrieked, grabbing his head and dancing out of bed so hastily he hit his head again. I can help. I can help.
Perfect.
He hurried up to the bars to face the blonde on the other side, still hissing as he held his bruised skull with one hand. Come on, dude. Let me out. I can do that. I can hack. No sweat. I'm Ghost. His would-be savior gave him a flat look.
You said you weren't Ghost.
He started to turn away. You were holding a bloody mop handle! I thought you were going to kill me. Take me to this secret terminal. I'll do it. For the love of God, I'll do it! The man hesitated, then turned slowly back to face him.
I'm Tyson.
Slade bit down the urge to tell him he didn't give a crap who he was. Just give him something with pixels and... Slade bit down the urge to tell him he didn't give a crap who he was, just give him something with pixels and lines of code.
That could be done better. Emphasis on who. Like, he didn't give a crap who he was.
Slade bit down the urge to tell him he didn't give a crap who he was, just give him something with pixels and lines of codes. Damn it. Slade bit down the urge to tell him he didn't give a crap who he was, just give him something with pixels and lines of code. He smiled and held his hand out through the bars. I'm Ghost.
Your jumpsuit says Slade Gardner.
Tyson said. Tyson said. It was pretty obvious he wasn't going to let him out again. Or shake his hand. Especially shake his hand. Slade's smile faded, and he dropped his hand. Listen, you ill-bred inebriate. If you are somehow smart enough to get your incompetent ass to a back door into the system, you know damn well you can get us out if you can crack the code. But you can't, because you're an undereducated monkey with a Pleistocene fetish. The Pleistocene fetish. But you can't, because you're an undereducated monkey with a Pleistocene fetish. You need me, because you don't have the processing capacity to work through complex mathematical algorithms in your woefully inadequate little brain. Tyson stared at him blankly for some time. Finally, he said,
What?
You need me, Slade repeated for him. The thug cocked his head.
No.
Ah, fuck.
No. I mean that word you said.
Slade blinked at him. Their lives or deaths were hanging upon the blundering orangutan's next act. Their lives or deaths were... Damn it. Their lives or deaths were hanging upon the blundering orangutan's next action, and he was standing there trying to get him to pronounce geological epochs. Let me make sure I have that pronunciation right. Yep, got it. Geological epochs. Pleistocene.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That.
Wish you could hear that. Tyson scratched at his cheek, obviously struggling.
So that's like what? Dinosaur time or something?
Slade squinted and considered walking away and letting the nice primate play with his bloody stick. But because he really didn't want to starve to death, he'd heard that was a miserable way to go, he reluctantly said, It's a geological epoch that lasted from about 2,588,000 to 11,700 years ago, spanning the Earth's most recent period of glaciations. When the idiot just peered at him like he'd spoken ancient dreet, Slade sighed deeply. It roughly correlates with the Stone Age, give or take about 600,000 years. The tiny rusted gears in the guy's head started turning.
So, you called me a Neanderthal?
Nope.
So, you called me a Neanderthal?
He pronounced it Neanderthal. Slade sighed and lowered his
But you
cranium.
didn't.
Yeah, I
You
did.
said no. You.
Yes, I did. I went back.
A Neanderthal.
See, because I read that next line.
But the first part was wrong. He said Neanderthal. You said Neander.
Oh, Nander. Okay, I didn't see that part.
So, you called me a Neanderthal?
He pronounced it Neanderthal. Slade sighed and lowered his cranium to the bars, his last little flicker of hope going out upon that half-wit drawl. Nope. Slade sighed and lowered his cranium to the bars, his last little flicker of hope going out upon that half-wit drawl. Never mind. Tyson tapped the bars by Slade's head, looking curious.
So you called me a Neanderthal?
Slade lifted his head, eyes fixed on the bloody stick the man was holding against the bars. It was somebody's scalp. Yes, I called you a Neanderthal. Tyson chuckled. I'll get rid of that. Tall.
You're a dick.
I'm a smart dick. I'm a dick that can get you out of this place and on your road to sweet, sweet freedom and back to all that lovely murdering, looting, and raping you did with your misspent youth. Tyson's glacial blue eyes darkened a bit.
Never raped nobody.
The look in the man's eyes added that he had, indeed, murdered people. Slade groaned inwardly and dropped his face back to the bars, resigning himself to his body consuming its own fats, glucose, and proteins as it starved to death. Tyson tapped the bar near his forehead again, smearing more blood and hairs across the steel.
You really ghost?
Yes, Slade told the stick. I'm really ghost. Tyson grunted. Let's get rid of that. Really ghost.
Thought so. You're the only guy in this place without a bunkmate.
That's how you found me? Slade asked, surprised. Tyson shrugged, though it seemed like there was a flicker of something more in his eyes before he hid it.
You stick out like a sore thumb. Figure Ghost isn't your average criminal, so he's not going to look like your average criminal.
Meaning, he found Slade by his creepy hairstyle that he'd gotten at doctor's order not to cut. Meaning, he found Slade by his creepy hairstyle that he'd gotten a doctor's order not to cut, now at a full 6 inches despite the prison's half-inch regulation. Huh, Slade said. Slade had agonized that the government goons would figure out he was Ghost by merit of the first cutting and bleeding of his creepy hair, but all it had taken had been a couple greased palms and a quick doctor's note detailing a paralyzing phobia of haircutting, and Slade had been yet another low-profile criminal awaiting an early parole. The phobia hadn't even been hard for him to fake either, considering that haircuts caused him vomit-inducing pain, the loss of each strand kind of like snipping off a 6-inch bundle of raw nerves with a hacksaw. Still, The fluffy white hair went pretty well with his documented age, which was, depending on the record book, anywhere from 72 to 106. Slade was actually 99 in Earth years, but due to his vast financial reserves, expensive Kongi medicines, and his own drunken experimentation, he had the body of a 25-year-old. So at this point, then Joe's got to be like 100.
Yeah, something like
100
that.
something. 100 like 6? 105?
Yeah. The problem is they keep switching between Kongi turns versus human years. So that's where the discrepancies are coming from.
He had the body of a 25-year-old. The doctors and processing clerks usually raised a brow at the apparent discrepancy, but Slade gave them a sad smile and told them of spending his life savings on rejuvenators, only to end up in a prison for a The doctors and processing clerks usually raised a brow at the apparent discrepancy, but Slade gave them a sad smile and told them of spending his life savings on rejuvenators. The doctors and processing clerks usually raised a brow at the apparent discrepancy, but Slade gave them a Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Okay. The doctors and processing clerks usually raised a brow at the apparent discrepancy, but Slade gave them a sad smile and told them of spending his life savings on rejuvenators only to end up in prison for a nasty case of fraud that really wasn't his fault. It was his dentist's fault, and they always gave him that holier-than-thou look and ushered him onward in line, a fresh new inmate with an unhealthy case of tonsure-phobia. Okay. And they always gave him that holier-than-thou look and ushered him onward in line, a fresh new inmate with an unhealthy case of tonsure-phobia. And they always gave him that holier-than-thou look and ushered him onward in line, a fresh new inmate with an unhealthy case of tonsure-phobia to be whipped into shape by the impassioned sermons of the faithful. Little did they know that Slade reread his favorite novels in his head during the God Talks, flipping through the pages in his photographic memory as the priests droned on about their Savior's will, human failings, responsibility, yada yada yada. Since his internment in New Basel Harmonious, Slade had reread all of Heinlein's works twice, Card's lifetime compilation, and was currently halfway through Stephen King's Omnibus. But Tyson apparently still wasn't satisfied.
"Okay," he said. "Folks say Ghost's good at math. So what's the square root of 718?
26.7955? 26.7955? Slade repeated immediately before he had a chance to think about it. He cocked his head with a little frown. Why? Why?
No, it's not.
Slade blinked. Yes. It is. Tyson tapped the bars again with his stick.
I used a calculator before I went looking for Ghost. It's not 26.7955.
Slade peered at him. Then he cocked his head, a couple more of his massive mental gears lazily clunking into rhythm with the first two, leaving the vast clock tower of his mind still sleeping as he recalculated and looked for flaws. You said the square root of 718?
Yep,
Tyson said, utterly smug. 26.7955.
It's 13.859. Dumbass.
Slade stared at him. He could find no way that even a drunken, lobotomized primate would have mashed so many incorrect keys on a calculator to come up with that answer instead of the correct one. With a smug grin, Tyson snorted and turned to go. 13.859 squared, Slade said to Tyson's very broad back, is not even a whole number, you unreasonably stupid jackass! Next time you decide to test me, actually do your research first! Tyson hesitated, then turned, an intelligent gleam in his eye before it was quickly hidden again.
Or maybe that was your test, Slade suggested.
That was supposed to be Slade.
Oh. Yeah. Or maybe that was your test.
Slade suggested.
Tyson gave him a long, appraising look, then almost reluctantly went over, inserted the warden's key once more, and hit the button again. Slade's door slid delightfully open. When Slade cocked his head and peered out into the hall, Tyson gestured with his stick.
This way.
So, Slade said slowly, glancing down the hall. Seeing no one watching Tyson's back, he didn't step out into the hallway with him. Warily, he offered, seeing no... Where's your bunkmate, Tyson? In reply, Tyson held up the stick and casually picked a clump of scalp and hairs off of it. Looking at the hairs, Tyson said,
He got bored at night. Started telling me about all the girls he kidnapped on a lonely stretch of highway and dragged out to the woods for a few days before he left them, wandering in the wilderness. Apparently the feds only got him for tax evasion.
He flicked the bloody clump of hair aside and gave Slade a flat look. Meaning Tyson didn't like rapists either. When Slade just swallowed, Tyson pointed the broken haft of the stick at Slade's left eyeball, which rested only slightly higher than Tyson's. Both of them were very tall men. Let's try that again. When Slade just swallowed, Tyson pointed the broken haft of the stick at Slade's left eyeball, which rested only slightly higher than Tyson's. Both of them were very tall men.
You got stories like that. You keep 'em to your fucking self.
Slade, who was skinny and geekish to Tyson's badass meaty thuggery, blurted, I've never heard anyone.
And you got stories like that. You keep 'em to your fucking self.
There's something wrong with the accent there.
You keep 'em to your fucking self.
Slade,
that. You keep like that. You keep 'em to your fucking self.
I've never heard anyone. Tyson raised his platinum blonde brow in obvious skepticism. Well, I've physically never heard anyone. He'd stolen billions of credits from white family corporations and Jahul businessmen, but he'd never actually punched someone in the face. He figured that would probably hurt his fist. Tyson grunted and twisted the mop handle in his hand.
Heard you drove some guys insane just by looking at them.
He didn't seem too impressed, just curious. I did a bit more than look at them, but yeah, that was the general idea. Tyson peered up at him. The shouts of indignant inmates still chorusing around them. Tyson peered up at him, the shouts of indignant inmates still chorusing around them. Nope.
How?
Slade rolled his eyes. I couldn't possibly explain it to you.
More sarcasm on that one. Like emphasis on possibly.
I couldn't possibly explain it to you. Tyson, a nearly 300-pound thug who was quite pointedly blocking his way to freedom, crossed his impressive arms over his impressive chest and said,
Try.
Ed,
Try.
Slade took a deep breath, then saw. Okay, I'll just get rid of that one.
Bye.
I started subtly making them question their own self-worth, their safety, and their grasp on sanity. Tyson squinted at him.
Sanity?
Slade shrugged. Yeah, it's called gaslighting. You yank the rug out from under them, you change what they perceive as standard in their life, you don't give them any constants, you tell them they sleepwalk and brush their teeth in their sleep, then move their toothbrush after they go to bed, put it on the other side of the sink, maybe switch it out with somebody else's. I'd turn their pillowcases inside out when they were off on visiting hours, put their covers into some new spot each night, take their favorite necklace and put it around the neck of our resident Jesus figurine, maybe bribe the laundry guys to sew their name tag onto clothes. Fuck. All right, got to start from the very top of this one. Yeah, it's called gaslighting. You yank the rug out from under them. You change what they perceive as standard in their life. You don't give them any constants. You tell them they sleepwalk and brush their teeth in their sleep, then move their toothbrush after they go to bed. Put it on the other side of the sink, maybe switch it out with somebody else's. I'd turn their pillowcases inside out when they were off on visiting hours, put their covers into some new spot each night, take their favorite necklace and put it around the neck of our resident Jesus figurine, maybe bribe the laundry guys to sew their name tag onto clothes that were a size too small, then ask them if they were gaining weight. I'd painstakingly add a few fun notes to their Bible in their own handwriting, slip it under their hand, then casually tell them they had been talking God talk on those nights they weren't sleep brushing. Or I'd tell them they'd acted completely abnormal the day before, then bribe people into accusing them they'd said things they hadn't said, done stuff they hadn't done. Shit like that. Done! He gave a dismissive shrug. Shit like that. Tyson peered up at him for some time, a gorilla contemplating whether or not to humor a howler monkey.
People say you've got mind powers.
It was more of a question than a statement. Yeah, Slade said, thinking of the gigantic alien lizards that were going to smash down the walls for the delicious goodies inside. He gave a flourish. The Tesla of the Congressional Era! At your service. Can we please go to that terminal now? Can we please go to that terminal now? I heard they're gonna drop Kree in it. We really don't want to be trapped in the middle of a mass of caged humanity when Kree in it find this place. Tyson grunted, showing absolutely no hurry.
You don't look like much.
Slade blinked because, with his creepy ball lightning eyes and sometimes wriggly cotton ball hair, not to mention his reputation of weird mind powers, most people peed themselves when Slade gave them a sideways look. Thanks? Tyson uncrossed his arms.
This way.
Whew, it's getting hot.
This interaction has been fucking awesome that you're doing. It's just really cool. You can totally feel it off of.
I just love, I love it when we have, people that are basic, almost opposites. That's the easiest way, really.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, they're both feeding off each other's energy,
Yep.
The brute led him down the barred hall like he owned the place, taking books and painful-looking personal effects full on about the head and shoulders without even flinching. Slade, on the other hand, ducked and yelped each time a Bible impacted his sensitive skin, or his even more sensitive scalp. While Slade really didn't fear anything, pain was not his friend, and he generally avoided it if he could. Tyson stopped at the locked janitor's closet, produced a bloody key card from his pocket, and swiped it through the lock. Then he typed in an 8-digit code in the keypad, looking completely oblivious to the little scanner screen set into the wall beside it. It's gonna want a thumb scan, Slade said with a sigh. Well, that was a short stint of freedom. He wondered if the guy would beat him to death or eat him. Or both. Giving him a sideways look, Tyson retrieved a thumb from his pocket and pressed it to the screen. There was a loud, audible click as the heavy bolts thudded aside. Oh, Slade blinked. Stuffing both thumb and keycard back into his pocket, Tyson pushed the door open and gestured at him to go first with the jagged end of the stick, easing his way around his new friend, Bloody Scalp. With appropriate mention of possible brains, Slade slid past Mr. Stick and into the darkness inside. Following him, Tyson switched on the light. Slade, though, had already seen the paradisal... Paradisal?
Your guess is as good as mine on that one.
Paradisal.
Yep. Had already seen the paradisal... Slade, though, had already seen the paradisal blue glow coming from the back room and was hastily stepping over fallen mops, cleaning supplies, and a very dead body in order to get to the secret computer terminal. The moment he touched an honest-to-God electronic device again, Slade almost had a long-denied orgasm. It was a very basic emergency deal, hidden behind a painting, set into the wall with its own tiny keyboard, set much too high into the wall to be ergonomically friendly. Slade hastily pulled over the desk and sat down on what remained of the janitor's hamburger and fries, facing the wall. Tyson closed the main door and came up behind him. They said the password was...
Shh!
Slade commanded, holding up one hand. He ran his fingers across the keyboard, bathing in the luxurious blue glow of account locked, multiple entries of invalid password detected. Please use Warden's override or consult tech support. Ah, yes. Tech support. Slade closed his eyes and soaked up the long-missed light, counting the number of days it had been since he'd accessed anything more advanced than a landline to his lawyer. 387. Almost 13 months. 9,281 hours. Over 1 year. Over 1 year without even a cell phone. It had been hell. True hell. See? Tyson offered, stepping up beside him. I think the guy was lying, so I wouldn't cut off his... See? Tyson offered, stepping up beside him. I think the guy was lying, so I wouldn't... Cut off his... Slade snapped again, distractedly cutting at the air behind him as the overgrown Ferg once again interrupted his zen. There was a long pause, then Tyson said, "But you're just sitting there, on that guy's hamburger."
That's fucking awesome. That delivery was great.
Slade opened his eyes and scowled disgustedly at the wall. It was so hard to get good lackeys nowadays. To the painted concrete, he said, "If I tell you to shut up, that I need a few minutes to consider the wonders of if-then statements and irrelevant metadata before I spring your hairy ape-like ass from this thug convention, then it's your job to go to your corner and wait for me to finish." Slade felt Tyson staring at his back. The big man sounded confused when he said, "I just beat 3 men to death in the last 20 minutes. That's nice. Go get me a soda or something." He reached up and slid his fingers along the back of the terminal, feeling for a plug or a switch. He found a switch. Hallelujah. That would make things so much easier. You know what? If you don't get us out of here in the next 20 seconds, I'm going to add your brains to this stick. "I'd like a Pepsi, if you can find one," Slade said, as he flipped the console's power off. The console monitor went dark, and Slade heard the sweet music of a processor powering down. As he mentally calculated the brand, age, and capacity of the machine in front of him, Slade gave a delighted giggle. Early 21st century technology was so buggy, especially systems using a Windows environment, which this clearly was, That meant it was plausible to gain access with an SQL injection, which would save him so much time. Realizing his lackey was still standing around, Slade gestured impatiently and said, "Make sure it's plain and cold, with corn syrup, not that fake shit." All right, I want to go back. That meant it was plausible to gain access with an SQL injection, which would save him so much time. Realizing his lackey was still standing around, Slade gestured impatiently and said, "Make sure it's plain and cold. Make sure it's plain and cold with corn syrup, not that fake shit. Make sure it's plain and cold with corn syrup, not that fake shit."
So he's totally confident right now, and he's just distracted and just like...
Yeah, he's just trying to brush him away. Hey, get the fuck out of here. Right?
Yeah. I think you could do it better than make sure it's plain.
Make sure it's plain and cold.
You hesitated on the M.
On the what?
You hesitated on the M when you said, like, make sure.
But you said he's distracted, right?
But he can still process. So
so he's not distracted. He's clearly saying, "Okay, go. Make sure it's plain and cold with corn syrup, not that fake shit."
Yeah, better.
Tyson was silent for so long that Slade wondered if he was getting out his beat stick. Then, reluctantly, Tyson said, "Pepsi's expensive." After Earth's discovery by the barely concealed alien tyranny known as Congress, Pepsi had become one of the most valuable substances humanity had to offer, just beneath oregano and rosemary in universal demand, though it was the hedonistic Ueshi who had begun purchasing vast quantities of Pepsi for shipment to pleasure planets like Kaleu and Tholiba, whereas the more reserved Ureki financed the rosemary perfume trade. Almost 50 years after it went universal, Slade still felt more than a little vindicated that his favorite drink happened to be loved throughout the galaxy by aliens famous for knowing how to have a good time. It did irk him, however, that Pepsi now cost 10 times as much as a regular soda and had taser-enhanced AI-embedded vending machines all of its own, just in case anyone decided to get frisky. Slade glanced down at the desk, picked up the janitor's change dish with the tiny stuffed lizard in it, ascertained it had enough money in it to buy a Pepsi. Slade glanced down at the desk, picked up the janitor's change dish with the tiny stuffed lizard in it, ascertained it had enough money in it to buy a Pepsi, then handed the tray to Tyson and went back to his work. Tyson didn't move. Still staring at the dead monitor, he said, "Why'd you shut it off?" "Well," Slade said, as he waited for the hard drive to completely power down, "some idiot came in here before me, and after the computer patiently told him the password was bad the first time, he entered it 2 more times, just to be sure." He flipped the switch back on. The computer, it was ancient, Slade realized, delighted, whirred back to life. Behind him, Tyson squinted at the screen. "You rebooted?" "If in doubt, let the bad out," Slade said. As he was waiting for the dinosaur to load, he felt around the back for an Ethernet cable, but found only a power supply, which meant it was wireless. Oh, this was going to be fun. "Why are you grinning? Something funny?" Instead of acquiring an ice-cold Pepsi like he'd been told, the big man had come to stand beside Slade, peering into the hidden computer cubby like a very large dog that... Peering into the hidden computer cubby like a very large dog that had no compunctions with being in the way. "I'm grinning," Slade said, pushing him bodily aside, "because I'm thirsty, and you are going to get me a soda." No sooner had he spoken than the access window appeared. Fresh and new, sans the colossal dumbass screen, with a cheerful little... No sooner had he spoken than the access window appeared, fresh and new, sans the colossal dumbass screen, with a cheerful little, Username and password? Prompt to welcome him to the new Basal Harmonious security system. Instead of slogging through that particular clusterfuck, Slade entered the SQL injection test, or... Slade entered the SQL injection test, or equals, in both the username and password fields to determine whether or not he needed to waste his time building a password generator. Immediately, the computer logged him in as the very first user in the database, a gracious Mr. Alvin Mathers. Slade knew him as a part-time security officer with an attitude problem who liked to work Sundays and holidays for the extra pay. Using his newly acquired admin capabilities, Slade began dismantling the woefully vulnerable... Using his newly acquired admin capabilities, Slade began dismantling the woefully vulnerable prison system from the inside. The imbeciles who had programmed the software, it seemed, had been operating under the assumption that a prisoner, or any other ne'er-do-well with half a brain and an afternoon of programming experience, would simply never have access to the system itself. How quaint. 20 minutes later, Tyson brought him a soda. Pepsi. Cold. Because Slade had unlocked the doors to the main halls, the warden's office, the armory, and the staff break room. It was the staff break room that interested Slade the most. He hadn't had a good Twinkie in forever. Tyson had gotten real quiet the moment the door's open alarm had gone off in the main hall, and hadn't said much since. Tyson had gotten real quiet the moment the door's open alarm had gone off in the main hall, and hadn't said much since, except a gruff... Let me try that one more time. I need some water. Tyson had gotten real quiet the moment the door's open alarm had gone off in the main hall, and hadn't said much since... Tyson had gotten real quiet the moment the door's open alarm had gone off in the main hall, and hadn't said much since, except a gruff... Here, as he handed Slade his soda, his new body Kevlar and an AK-47 from the armory strapped to his body. You put it in a cup. You put it in a cup. Slade complained, taking a drink. He grimaced. And you poured it straight in. Why do people do that? It loses 16% of its carbonation when you do that. And you poured it straight in. Why do people do that? He took another sip and continued tapping commands into the keyboard with his free hand. Tyson scowled at him. It's easier to drink quickly in a cup. Yes, but I wanted to savor it. He took another swallow and studied the maps of the cell blocks, trying to determine the best system of releasing the 7 stories of inmates without getting killed in the process. Ever since the door's open alarm had gone off, inmates had been howling at the bars, thrashing and screaming like animals. It made Slade ever more sensitive to the fact that about half the guys in the block knew or suspected he was a ghost, and almost all of them would jump at the chance to try and coerce a few million credits out of him before they bashed his brains out on the polished concrete floors. Let's see if I... Coerce a few million credits out of him. Damn it. And almost all... It made Slade ever more sensitive to the fact that about half the guys in the block knew or suspected he was Ghost, and almost all of them would jump at the chance to try and coerce a few million credits out of him before they bashed his brains out on the polished concrete floors. Tyson squinted at him, then at his monitor, then at the flattened cheeseburger that Slade had shoved to one side of the desk after he'd peeled it from the seat of his prison jumpsuit.
You want to move this operation to the warden's office?
Slade snorted. Let's get rid of that.
You want
one.
to... office?
I couldn't do anything there that I can't do here. Besides, I hate the warden. If anything, I'd shit on his desk. I'd rather not stare at pictures of his grandkids, if I can avoid it. He kept perusing prison schematics.
So, what are we doing? Can you get the gates open?
Slade made a dismissive gesture and took another sip of his 1/6 flat soda. I could have gotten the gates open 20 minutes ago. I'm trying to figure out where the nearest Armani store is. Looks like L.A. Tyson peered at him so long, Slade turned around to look. When he did, Tyson said,
Armani?
Yeah. The clothing? When Tyson just continued to stare at him, Slade sighed and said, The clothing? When Tyson just continued to stare at him, Slade sighed and said, like Dolce & Gabbana, Tom Ford, Ralph Lauren. Nice stuff. We've got to get new threads, man. Said, like Dolce & Gabbana, Tom Ford, Ralph Lauren. Nice stuff. We've got to get new threads, man. He examined his new lackey's blood-stained jumpsuit with a critical eye. Hell, I'd even spring for a new suit for you. You would look totally badass in black, you know that? Tyson continued to stare at him.
They're dropping man-eating lizards the size of shopping centers on the planet. And you're worried about Armani?
The government shrinks said I had a flair for drama. And what's more dramatic than this? He gestured at his freakish wads of cotton white hair. With silver silk in the middle of an apocalypse? Let's try that again. And what's more dramatic than this? He gestured at him. With silver silk in the middle of an apocalypse. He grinned a little, considering what it would be like to wear a real suit again. Maybe a maroon handkerchief or cuffs. I'm going to have it delivered. Tyson squinted.
Delivered.
To the penitentiary, see? Slade showed Tyson the order form on the monitor. You're... what? A 30 at the shoulder? Wait, a 30? He's supposed to be big, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to be big.
Hold on. At the shoulder, do you mean like across this way?
I don't know. I looked it up.
30 at
I'll
the
go
shoulder.
look it up again. I guess it doesn't matter, but
Kind of, it matters. The details are really important for Slade. Let's see. Measurement at the shoulder. Suit.
it's just a straight from one end to the other, is what it's saying.
Like just 30 inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just confusing. I think I'm just confusing at the shoulder with. Yeah, okay, I see. I'm getting that confused with measurement around the chest, I think. I think that's what I'm used to looking at. That's what I'm used to thinking about when it comes to.
Yeah, I went up
Suit-
I
suit
went and looked
sizes.
up suit sizing and how they do it. So
Gotcha. A 30 at the shoulder? Let me try this. What? A 30? What? A 30 at the shoulder?
that's great.
What? 30 at the shoulder? Tyson suddenly had the muzzle of his AK-47 filling Slade's right nostril, his meaty fist gripping the back of Slade's head with enough pressure to scalp him.
You are going to open the gates, or I'm going to blow your creepy ALO head off. I don't give a fuck about our money.
Creepy, huh? Damn it. What time is it now? 2:47.
About our money. About our money.
Creepy, huh? Let me muffle my voice a little more.
I don't give a fuck about our money.
Creepy, huh? There we go.
Our money.
Creepy, huh? Slade said, his moist. Slade said, his voice muffled by gunmetal. Creepy, huh? There we go.
I don't give a fuck about our money.
Creepy, huh?
Slade.
Yes, there you go.
Seriously, where do people get that? Tyson's ice-blue eyes narrowed, and Slade saw his chances of surviving the next 3 microseconds decrease by about 100%. Slade sighed deeply and closed the order form. My first real chance to wear something decent for a change, and I'm foiled by an Iron Age transplant with access to 20th century weaponry. Tyson had not removed his gun.
Did you just insult me again?
Slade thought about it. No, not really. Just stating a fact. You look like you've got more than your fair share of Neanderthal in your blood, but they weren't exactly stupid. Have you gotten a DNA test? They can be surprising, you know. Tyson looked like he wanted to shoot him, but he lowered his weapon and stepped back instead. Can be surprising, you know. Tyson looked like he wanted to shoot.
What do you want?
Slade blinked at him. What? Oh, he lowered his weapon. What?
I know how it works. They're dropping those lizards on us in 3 days, and the whole world left us here to rot. So you've got me between a rock and a hard place. What do you want for springing us?
Slade thought about it. Another Pepsi would be nice. Not in a cup. Cold. Unopened. I want to see condensation on the sides of that baby. Oh! And a Twinkie. Those are good. For a long minute, Tyson just stared at him. Then, in silence, he turned and walked out the door. Ah, yes. Excellent lackey material. As soon as Tyson was out the door, Slade went back to the Armani order form he had minimized, placed his rush order, then figured out where the nearest bookstore was. While everyone else would be looting grocery stores and pharmacies, Slade would be perusing his local Barnes & Noble for survivalist manuals and then getting other people to implement the concepts inside. Ah, the perks of being a leader. The nearest Barnes & Noble, it appeared, was 4.5 miles out of town in a big new shopping center built in the middle of nowhere, one of the many such places adding to the urban sprawl of America. Like a vast majority of such retail temples built during the Ureki perfumes boom, it had been erected more on a wishful, build it and they will come mentality rather than any form of serious strategy. It was due to close in 2 months, selling out to an Ueshi electronics firm. It had, however, a Bajnan-run interplanetary Bank of Congress, which was nice. By the time Tyson returned with a Pepsi and a half-smashed Twinkie, Slade had transferred large amounts of money from his Phalor bank to his illicit Earth accounts and was in the process of hiring an on-demand hairstylist. As soon as the beep of the door announced his gorilla friend's return, Slade minimized the window back to the prison schematics. Obviously, having seen the flash of switching windows, Tyson frowned.
"What are you doing?"
"Opening the doors," Slade said, waving a finger over the keyboard with a flare. "Like so." He pushed the enter key on the command he had typed into the prompt over 30 minutes before, and suddenly every door in the prison slammed open from every single cell to the cafeteria from every single cell to the cafeteria access to the outside gates. All around them, freed men began to hoot and run wild, their feet sounding like thunder as they rushed from their prisons. Slade, however, wasn't finished. Using the dead janitor's cell phone, which he had wired into the prison system as a one-way radio, he put the receiver to his mouth and said, "Attention, prisoners of New Basel Harmonious! This is the ghost speaking. Attention!" Where'd it go? Here it is. Attention!
Can you put more like flair into that? Like he's all about the drama and like the drama and the sarcasm. So I mean like attention, you know.
Gotcha. More showy.
Yes.
Attention, prisoners of New Basel Harmonious! This is the ghost speaking. Attention, prisoners of New Basel Harmonious! This is the ghost speaking. The thunder of feet quieted almost instantly as the booming remnants of his words continued to echo down the concrete halls. Yeah! That ghost! I figured you guys didn't want to rot in here any more than I did, so consider yourself fully pardoned by the greatest mind in the congressional era. This is an apocalypse, people, so before you leave here to brave that completely unarmed residential center to the west, you should take whatever you need from the armory, which is located on the 3rd floor, all the way down to the east wing. I've already taken what I wanted from there, so I'll be exiting via the front gate, and I expect not to meet any resistance on the way. You think I'm good at hacking computers? You should see how good I am with a gun. Everyone will stay indoors until myself and my companions have exited, at which point you will be free to leave. If you have questions, come see me in the warden's office. He ended the call. Tyson frowned at Slade.
"You realize you just told every thug in this building to take a pot shot at you?"
Slade grinned and palmed the phone. "I'm also not going to be exiting via the front door." He slid off the desk and stretched, then looked his slightly shorter, but infinitely more muscular, brute of a lackey over. "You want to come with me?" Tyson gave him an odd look.
"I'm the one with the gun."
"True, but I'm the one with the plan. Capital P." He smiled, showing his perfectly capped teeth.
"I just fought the urge to shove my gun up your nose again." "What plan?"
"A plan to keep us alive." beginning with our heroic exit through the kitchen loading bay, to keep us alive. Beginning with our heroic exit through the kitchen loading bay and ending with a damn good steak. Tyson twitched at steak. Sounds good. Yeah, Slade said, handing Tyson a black plastic garbage bag he'd taken from a roll on a shelf. Put your head through the top and your hands through the sides and use it like a poncho. He demonstrated, wrapping himself in another bag, then wiggled his arms to the crinkle of plastic. Tyson stared at him blankly. Slade blinked at Tyson, then down at the bag. What? My mother did it for me all the time on camping trips. Tyson gave him a flat look, then handed him back the bag. So we're going out through the kitchen? Yeah. I opened up the doors and the gates. Should be no sweat. Let all those other common criminals shoot themselves. I arranged transportation, real discreet. Some people will do anything if you pay them enough. It'll be waiting out back with my new suit. This time, Tyson only peered at him a minute or two before grunting and tugging his AK-47 over his shoulder. For a minute, Slade thought he was going to shoot him. Then Tyson simply went to the door, jerked it open, and held it for him. Let's go, boss. Slade snatched up a dustpan, put it over his head, and hurried out the door into the blood-stained hallway. Off in the distance, he heard a chorus of manly screeches as inmates began giving New Basil Harmonious a facelift. Or killed each other. Or both. Probably both. Seeing the dustpan, Tyson continued to squint at him like some sort of talking rodent, then stepped into the hall behind him, looking utterly badass with his big, antique gun at his shoulders to stop a linebacker. His shoulders to stop a line. Okay, I think I get it. Even better, when Slade's fire alarm program timed out and the halls from the janitor's closet to the kitchen exit began to be drenched with blaring sirens and ice water, Tyson seemed to be utterly unfazed when the cold water hit him, which Slade found delightful. It gave him more street cred as a bodyguard if he could keep a straight face when his nuts were unexpectedly freezing off. Let's try this. It gave him more street cred as a bodyguard. It gave him more street cred as a bodyguard if he could keep a straight face when his nuts were unexpectedly freezing off. This way. Oh. This way, Slade said from under the shield of his dustpan. Between it and the plastic bag, he was relatively dry, despite the icy drenching. With any luck, the rest of the prison hated getting wet as much as he did, and the path to their extraction point would be clear of bad guys with guns. Tyson glowered at him a moment. Just so you know, Tyson said, as they headed for the kitchen, if there's no steak at the end of this, I'm going to shoot you. Under his rain protection, Slade cocked his head at his new lackey. Well, that could get unpleasant. Sure could. Slade made an uncomfortable laugh, trying not to calculate how many hundreds of different ways the day could unfold sans steak. Good. Slade made an Let's go a little further there. Or could. Slade made an uncomfortable there we go. Sans steak. It was definitely a lot. He led them to the cafeteria. Which, with its torrential icy downpour, had been utterly deserted, then opened the staff door to the room full of plastic cutlery and ready-made microwavables. What time is it? Oh, shit. All right, guys. I have got to go. I'm late for a meeting, I just realized. So, you guys, thank you for coming and hanging out. I will be back at it tomorrow, picking up right exactly where we're leaving off here. So...
That was awesome.
All right. Scared the hell... What did you snort at? What did Carrie snort at? Okay.
I
Anyway,
don't know.
Carrie, don't snort things. All right, you guys have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time. Later.